Marvel Studios is really good at what they do. Over the past 8 years, they've created a tightly interconnected cinematic universe, spanning across 14 films and counting, which is unheard of in the history of cinema. Not only that, but the majority of the movies are actually good. Some are even genuinely great. They've consistently made really smart choices in terms of who they hire in front of and behind the camera, giving us nerds the huge, spectacular superhero movies we've dreamed of for decades. I only really have 2 major issues with their approach. One, the generic, unmemorable scores has already been covered in some really good video essays. So I want to talk about the other one, Marvel's color grading. Or in other words, why do Marvel's movies all look like muddy concrete? Like, look at that. It's a great scene, but that's really ugly. What is color grading? Now, in case you're not a filmmaker or person who's into technical terminology, let me briefly explain what I mean. Color grading is the digital manipulation of the colors and tones of the image you see on screen. This was first used in 2000, on Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And since then has become an essential part of literally every motion picture you see. From movies to TV to commercials to YouTube videos, the rise of color grading connects directly with the rise of digital cinematography, as in shooting with digital cameras as opposed to traditional film cameras. High-end digital cameras shoot an extremely flat image, meaning there's very low contrast and saturation. It looks really gray and dull, but that's specifically so you have the most information there to use when color grading. So you can take footage that looks like this and make it look like this. The problem. So, what does this have to do with Marvel? Well, Marvel's first 3 movies, Iron Man 1 and 2 and Thor, were shot on film. After that, they switched to digital using the Genesis on Captain America, the first Avenger, and then the Arri Alexa on every one of their subsequent films, from the Avengers up through Doctor Strange. So, what's the issue here? Well, Marvel's best-looking movies also happen to be the ones shot on film, but there's more to it than that. My issue isn't that the other movies are shot digitally. It's that they consistently use the same style of color grading on all their digital footage, creating an image that's flat and dull when it should be vibrant and exciting. Digital cinematography can look amazing, but it has to be graded properly. The root of the problem is the lack of proper black values, as in, the spots in the image that should be black, like the deepest parts of the shadows, aren't. Look, when I use the eyedropper tool in Adobe After Effects, this is what it tells me it is: dark gray. And looking at the shot, you would think that spot should be black. Having a pure black value in a shot makes the other colors stand out more. And since the Marvel movies don't have proper black, the colors don't pop. Since we're talking about superhero movies, I want to illustrate this point using superhero comics. Comic art. In traditional comics artwork, there is a penciler who draws the pictures with, a pencil, and then an inker who uses black ink to go over the pencils and give contrast and definition to the image. Then the colorist, obviously, colors it. Superhero comics are generally pretty colorful, and a big part of what makes the colors stand out is the contrast between them and the pure black of the inks. There was a brief fad in the early 2000s of skipping the inks and going straight from pencils to colors. The most well-known example of this would probably be Salvador Larroca's art in Extreme X-Men. See how there are no actual blacks there, and it all looks kind of flat and washed out. That's basically the problem with how Marvel's movies look. Also in the comics, everyone realized this didn't look good, and stopped doing it. Cinematography. Let's look at Guardians of the Galaxy, which I think has the best cinematography of any of Marvel's digitally shot movies. Although some of that gets lost in the color grading. I'm going to do 10 seconds worth of adjustments. Really just tweaking the levels and boosting the saturation a little bit, and let's look at how they fare side by side. I know these are aesthetics, and thus are totally subjective. But I think that's a much more vibrant image. It's more dynamic, it has more definition, and it looks like what I think a superhero movie should look like. Let's do the same thing for Civil War, a movie I love despite the fact that it looks like an empty parking lot. These adjustments obviously help more on scenes shot at night or inside, instead of in the middle of a sunny day. But there's still a noticeable improvement. It's a bummer, because Marvel hires some really good cinematographers, and then does their work a disservice with how they handle it in post-production. Here's what John Toll's work looks like in Iron Man 3. And here's what it looks like in Jupiter Ascending, which was his next film. These were even shot on the same camera. Whose fault? It's easy to jump straight to the camera and blame the Alexa, but that's not really accurate. This is the same camera that shot Mad Max Fury Road. And obviously that didn't have the same problem. Look at this scene in Skyfall. The blacks are actually black and it looks amazing. This is mainly a matter of color grading and Marvel setting top-down requirements on their movies. That they all use the same camera and that they all go through the same post-production process with the same colorist. The issue is way more complex than I'm making it out to be. There's the whole matter of how different cameras interpret different types of light, and why some look better than others. For example, this is why the outdoor daylight scenes in Marvel movies look the crappiest, and the scenes lit with fluorescent lights tend to look the best. Since the image that gets recorded into the Alexa is so flat, with so much to work with, it takes a ton of skill and work to get the perfect look. It's often easier to stick with the flat style and just embrace it, which is why every music video these days looks like this, when they used to look like this. But you have to consider what works best for your movie. That flatter look makes sense for, say, Spotlight or Sicario, where you might want the visuals more muted and closer to reality. But when you're dealing with a big, bombastic superhero movie, don't you want the images to be bright, to pop off the screen? Not to be a bunch of muddy gray tones? The recent DC movies, for all their problems, at least have this figured out. Look, Marvel is a billion-dollar company with an insane record of success, and I'm sure their focus group tested this to gain empirical evidence that audiences like flat, dull-looking superhero movies. So this is just my opinion. But looking across all their movies, there's the appearance that they copied and pasted the same color grading with the same levels and same color palette on everyone. Now, is there hope for the future? Actually, yes, there is. There's some change coming. The upcoming Guardians of the Galaxy, Volume 2 is the first Marvel Studios film to switch from the Airy Alexa to the new Red Weapon 8K camera, which is a really cool name. I'm excited about this move because, from what I've seen, red cameras are the way to go if you're shooting a blockbuster on digital. That's what Ridley Scott used for The Martian outro, what Michael Bay used on the last few Transformers movies. And what Guillermo del Toro used for Pacific Rim. The movie I would consider the gold standard for what digitally shot blockbusters can look like. Across the board, these had the vibrant colors and deep black values that Marvel's movies have lacked. We recently saw the first footage, and in my opinion it looks like a definite improvement over the first film. The colors are more vibrant, the blacks are deeper, and it just looks less flat. So I'm crossing my fingers that this isn't an outlier and more Marvel movies follow its lead. I wanted to make this video because I genuinely really like the movies that Marvel makes. And every time they make a new one, I hope that they'll fix this problem. It's small, but it matters. But if we're being honest, Marvel just go back to shooting your movies on film. You're making enough money? You can afford it. Worms. So that does it for this video essay, which is also my first video essay.